This wasn't supposed to happen. No one planned it. No one saw it coming. But one small human mistake changed the world forever. This is history by accident. This is one of the most repeated stories in American history. You've heard it. In 1626, the Dutch bought Manhattan from the Native Americans for 60 guilders worth of trinkets, beads, cloth, cheap trade goods for the island that would one day become New York City, the greatest real estate deal in history. Except, it didn't happen that way, not even close. Let's go back. The Dutch Republic is one of the most powerful trading empires on Earth. They're everywhere. South Africa, Indonesia, Brazil, the Caribbean, and now the coast of North America. They've been sailing up and down the eastern seaboard for years, trading furs, building relationships, setting up outposts, and they want a permanent base, a hub, a place where ships can dock, goods can be stored, and trade can flow in all directions. They find the perfect spot, a long, narrow island, deep natural harbor, fresh water, rivers on both sides. They call it Manhattan, the island of many hills, and they want it. So they send a man named Peter Minuit, Director General of the colony, diplomat, businessman. His job,
These
make
beads
a
and
deal,
cloth are fine.
and he does.
They are beautiful. What
In
do you seek?
1626,
Your furs, my
Peter Minuit
friends.
negotiates with a group of Native Americans. He hands over goods valued at 60 guilders. They hand over something, and the Dutch declare it a sale. Done. Manhattan is ours, 60 guilders. That's the story everyone knows. Except here's what they don't tell you. Peter Minuit didn't buy Manhattan from the people who lived there. He bought it from people who were just passing through. The group he negotiated with, they were the Canarsie people, from Brooklyn. They lived across the river. They didn't own Manhattan. They didn't live on Manhattan. They had no authority to sell Manhattan. But they took the goods anyway. Of course they did. Someone just offered them valuable trade items for land they didn't own. That's not a sale. That's a misunderstanding. Or maybe a very clever move by the Canarsie. Either way, the Dutch thought they'd bought an island. The Canarsie knew they'd sold something that wasn't theirs to sell. And the people who actually lived on Manhattan, the Lenape, nobody asked them anything. But wait, it gets stranger. Because even if Minuit had negotiated with the right people, even if he'd sat down with the actual Lenape who called Manhattan home, it still wouldn't have been a sale. Not in any way they understood it. Here's the thing about the Lenape. They didn't believe land could be owned. Not the way the Dutch meant it. To the Lenape, land was like air, like water, like sunlight. It belonged to everyone and no one. You could use it, farm it, hunt on it, live on it, but own it, sell it, lock other people out of it forever? That concept didn't exist. So when the Lenape engaged in any kind of exchange with the Dutch, they weren't signing away a piece of earth. They were agreeing to share it, to coexist, to allow the Dutch to use the land alongside them, not instead of them, not forever, not exclusively, just together, for now. That's what they understood. That's what the exchange meant to them. But the Dutch, they went home and wrote in their records, "We have purchased the island of Manhattan." Two groups, one transaction, two completely different understandings of what just happened. And that gap, that accidental mistranslation of values and worldviews, it would echo for centuries. Now here's where most history books stop. They tell you the sale happened, or they tell you it was a fraud, and then they move on. But the real story is messier, more human, more fascinating, because the Dutch didn't just show up and take. Not at first. In the early years, the Lenape and the Dutch actually coexisted. They traded. Beaver pelts for European cloth, wampum for tools, local knowledge for manufactured goods. The Lenape were skilled diplomats. They knew the land. They controlled the fur trade. The Dutch needed them. And for a while, it worked. The colony grew slowly. New Amsterdam, they called it. A small wooden settlement at the southern tip of the island. Windmills, a fort, a few hundred people. Nothing like what would come later. But then the Dutch began doing what
What
colonizers
is
do.
this strange fence?
They started expanding.
Why is it here?
Fencing off land.
It bars the way, but to
claiming
what?
areas the Lenape used for farming and hunting. Not negotiating, not sharing, taking. And the Lenape, who had thought this was about coexistence, discovered it wasn't. Tensions rose. There were raids, violent clashes, a brutal conflict called Kieft's War in the 1640s, named after the Dutch governor who provoked it. Hundreds died on both sides. Villages burned, relationships shattered. And slowly, painfully, the Lenape were pushed off their own land, not because of one exchange in 1626, but because of everything that came after it. The so-called purchase of Manhattan wasn't the crime. The crime was what it was used to justify. We bought it. 2 words, used to erase centuries of indigenous presence, used to turn a misunderstanding into a legal document, used to say, "This is ours now. You have to leave." And that's where the accident becomes a tragedy. Because here's the truth. There was no sale. There was a Dutch official who handed goods to the wrong people. There was a cultural gap so wide that both sides thought they were doing something completely different. And there was a colony that chose to interpret that moment as legal ownership, forever. Now, fast forward. The Dutch didn't hold Manhattan for long. In 1664, the English showed up with warships. They sailed into the harbor, pointed their cannons at the settlement, and said, "Surrender." And the Dutch, they surrendered. Just like that. No battle, no bloodshed. New Amsterdam became New York, named after the Duke of York, who would later become King James II of England. And all those Dutch records, all those careful documents claiming legal purchase of the island, the English took them and built on top of them. And by the time America became America, Manhattan had changed hands multiple times. Bought, sold, disputed, transferred, reclaimed, all based on a foundation that was never solid to begin with. And today, Manhattan is the most expensive real estate on the planet. A single square mile can be worth more than the GDP of a small country. The office buildings alone on one block of Midtown could fund entire nations. And it all traces back to a misunderstanding, to 60 guilders, to a Dutch official who shook hands with the wrong people, to 2 groups standing in the same moment and seeing completely different things. So here's the question. Why does this matter? Why dredge up a 400-year-old mistake? Because it's not just a story about Manhattan, it's a story about how history gets written, about how accidents become facts, how misunderstandings become law, how one group's confusion becomes another group's eviction. The purchase of Manhattan has been repeated so many times, in textbooks, in documentaries, in casual conversation, that it became true in the retelling, even though it was never real. And that tells us something important about power, about who gets to write the story, about how the version that survives isn't always the version that happened. The Lenape knew the land couldn't be sold. They knew what that exchange meant. But no one wrote down their version. Not in Dutch, not in English, not in the records that shaped what we teach our children. Their understanding of that day disappeared, and the Dutch version became history. That's not an accident of memory, that's an accident of power. And here's what makes it stranger still. The famous number, 60 guilders, worth about $24 in the early 20th century, worth about $1,000 today when adjusted. That number? We don't actually know if it's right. It comes from a single letter, written by a Dutch merchant named Peter Schagen in 1626. One letter, one source, and from that one letter, an entire mythology was born. The greatest real estate deal in history, the dumbest trade ever made. The moment America was stolen for pocket change, all of it, from one letter. That didn't even specify what the goods were. No mention of beads, no mention of trinkets. That came later, added by storytellers, historians who filled in the blanks, writers who wanted a more dramatic image. The beads might not have existed at all. The number? Probably a rough estimate. The sale? Never legally valid. And yet, We repeat it. As fact, as legend, as a punchline. Every single day. So what do we do with that? Maybe the lesson isn't about Manhattan. Maybe it's about stories. About how we accept the version handed to us. Without asking, who wrote this? Who benefited from this version? Whose story is missing? Because history isn't just what happened. It's what got remembered. And what got remembered is almost always the story told by whoever held the pen. The Lenape are still here, by the way. Many of their descendants live in Oklahoma, Wisconsin, and Ontario today. Displaced, scattered, but present. And they know exactly what happened in 1626. They always did. The Dutch thought they bought an island. The Canarsie happily took goods for land they didn't own. The Lenape thought they were welcoming neighbors. And somewhere in the middle of all that misunderstanding, the most valuable piece of real estate in human history changed hands, without a valid deed, without a legal seller, without a shared understanding of what any of it meant. History by accident, not the clean kind, not the popcorn flying across the lab kind, the messy kind, the kind that has real consequences, that echoes forward, that shapes the world we live in right now. Because right now, you can stand at the southern tip of Manhattan, look up at the skyline, watch billions of dollars in steel and glass scrape the clouds, and know that it all started with a misunderstanding, a Dutch official, the wrong people, and a concept of ownership that only one side believed in. That's history, not a series of clean decisions made by powerful men, but a tangle of mistakes and misreadings and moments where nobody fully understood what was happening. And yet, here we are, living in the aftermath, every single day. If this changed how you think about a story you thought you knew, subscribe to History by Accident, because that's what we do here. We pull back the curtain. We find the version that got buried. We ask the question nobody asked. Comment below, is there a famous story from history you think we've been getting wrong? Tell me, because chances are you're right. And I'll see you in the next one, where something else that wasn't supposed to happen changed everything.